realize. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. Yeah.
Well, Bhavna, contributing to a trend which is pretty much an international trend is difficult in individual capacity. But yes, I'm trying to, get the balance right. I'm working on a true crime book currently with my father. And Bhavna, if you could put your mic, there is a slight echo. Yeah. So I'm currently working on a true crime book with my father, Alok Lal, called The Kanpur Inferno. And there are always these, loopholes which you have in a real incident. There are places where your memory doesn't support you, or in other cases when you are actually talking to somebody who has been a part of an event, but you have not been there. So there are things you have to fill in. So I mean, marrying fact with fiction is really not a choice. It has to be done for every true account you write. But getting the balance right is important, because if the balance is off, then it's like blending whiskey. You can end up with a very bad desi tharra, which is intoxicating and good for some people, but it doesn't necessarily, you know, fall in line with good writing. So it's a major challenge, and my contribution to the trend is that I'm trying my best in the Kanpur Inferno to add my bits. I am writing a lot of fiction because I was not the top cop. So a lot of the fictional parts in the book are written by me, in fact. So let's see how I'm able to do it. One big challenge is, of course, blending the writing styles, because my father and I write in very different styles. And I have also been guided very ably by the Book Bakers Literary Agency. So I'm hoping that I get the balance right.
Right. Thank you so much, Bhavna, for the question. So a simple answer would be that whatever these wonderful authors respond to would be my contribution to fact and fiction, because we are all proud to associate with these wonderful authors. So okay, this answer I'll give you on two levels. One will be on a personal level, and the other one would be in the capacity of a literary agent. So, in the capacity of an author, I've written two books: The Pair of Putras and The Hunt for Rama's Bow, Adventure One of the Vishnu Chronicles. Now, The Pair of Putras is essentially a historical fiction, right? It's set in pre-independent India, and when you're writing a historical fiction, right, what happens is that the difference, so my first book was a historical fiction and the second one was a mythological fantasy. So the advantage that mythological fantasy has is that you can take a lot of leeway, because there may be different versions of a particular story, a mythological story. But when you're talking about history, history is recorded, so you cannot alter it, right? So the challenge over there basically was to blend fact with fiction, and at the same time impart information to the reader in a seamless manner. So if the Quit India movement is taking place on 8th August 1942, it has to take place over there. So your storyline has to move around that, so that it moves seamlessly. So my book traverses a 6-year period from 1936 to 1942 in a fictional town called Bhairavgarh. And Bhavna, a lot of people congratulated me on the kind of research that I had done on the book. But the truth is that I did no research. Historical and mythological genres are two genres that I am personally very fond of. So I've been reading about them since so many years. So it came naturally to me, right? Had I probably been writing about a chemistry book, then you could have said that I did a lot of research, because it didn't come naturally to me and I had to make an effort to write those things. So that is that. And I think people appreciated that. With respect to the second book, The Hunt for Rama's Bow, now what happens over there is that while you can take a lot of leeway, the point is that up to how much extent can you do that? Because when mythology is blended with religion, you do run a chance of hurting people's sentiments, and that cannot really happen. Otherwise there are a lot of issues that one may have to face. But the whole intention about writing about The Hunt for Rama's Bow stemmed from a discussion that I had at a literary festival, where one of the, throughout the discussion, what we basically gauged was that, in today's day and age, a lot of authors may know about, or, the youth of India may know about the Avengers, but they may not know, in the same detail about the Indian gods. So the idea was to, modernize them, bring them, in the present day and age, and also through various things that they are doing, disseminate information related to mythology without making it boring. So the book has a lot of things. For example, if I was to just give one example out of it, the general belief is that Ravan was from Lanka and Lord Ram was from India. But forget them being from different countries, they were both actually from the same state. So Lord Ram was from Ayodhya, as we all know, which is in UP. Whereas Ravan's father was a sage named Vishrav. And on Vishrav's name, there is a village called Bishrak, which is found in present day Greater Noida. So Ravan was actually from Greater Noida. Kuber was the king of Lanka. Ravan defeated Kuber and then became the king of Lanka, but he was actually from Greater Noida. In fact, there is a place called Mayapuri from where his wife Mandodari was from, and Mayapuri is present day Meerut. And if you go to Rajasthan, you will find a place called Ravan Ka Tila, which is where Mandodari and Ravan got married. So these are interesting nuggets of information which have been brought out in a seamless manner, which also entertains you, but at the same time educates you. So that has always been something that I have not done intentionally per se, but it's been I feel that these kind of things increase or enhance the value of the plot, because then people can appreciate that how your story and actual events have been merged. With respect to in my capacity as a literary agent, what I'd like to say is that I remember having discussed this earlier also, that as members of the literary fraternity, what basically empowers you, or the thing that you would be known by, is the legacy that you leave behind, right? And what I personally feel is that when you're bringing out concept stories, some of these stories have to be stories which people may forget if it's not told in time, right? Or these are stories that you as an individual but also as a nation need to know about. So there are a lot of such stories that we have worked on. There was this book called 21 K series, which was a non-fiction take on the Battle of Saragadi, right? Or we are doing so many cop related books. Alok sir's book, the Barabanki Narcos, is about the most successful drug raid that the police conducted. And I thought that was a story that needed to be told. Gunning for the God Man, which Mr. Ajay Pal Lamba and my father, Mr. Sanjeev Mathur, wrote about. We all know that Asaram Bapu was arrested, but how, what happened? Those are things that people want to know. There was a book called Miracle Men, which is behind the scenes story of India's 1983 World Cup win, and Nikhil Nas did that book, and it gave a lot of insight into what was happening in the players' minds, back then, because obviously there wasn't much of television in comparison to what it is right now. So these are the kind of books, and I'm just mentioning four or five. I remember having discussed this book that I'm doing with Sana Munir, where uh, the parts of Pakistan which Indians have not been able to see but have a strong relation in India's history. She's actually gone and photographed those places. So events ranging from the point where Alauddin Khilji entered India, or Bhagat Singh's college, or the place where Bhagat Singh assassinated Saunders, or the Kapoor mansion, all those kind of things. So what happens is that these are then immortalized for generations altogether, and that is the basic idea that you need to look at. And it cannot be boring. The moment it is boring, it becomes preachy, and people tend to either close the book, or the recollection factor, we see a severe drop over there. So I think there has to be a perfect blend. I'm happy that the authors of today realize that, and are not compromising on their vision, but are also dishing out something that the readers in India today want. Wow, superb. That's awesome.
It's me. I couldn't hear the name. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've actually, my contribution to this blending fact with fiction are two books which I published recently. One is Under the Mango Tree, and before that, I had published a poetry book, Lyrical Rhythms of My Heart. Both are actually, this is a journey of my life, and this is my autobiography. But if I write only the fact, then it's going to be boring because I'm not so important a person, for that someone will want to read my autobiography. So there is I've blended it with fiction. So I feel in fact, I did a research before writing these books, and I found out that, most of the readers like to read real life stories. So I wanted to, add some fiction to it. And when you blend real life and fiction, then it becomes very intriguing to the readers because they don't know which is fact and which is fiction. So they are really interested in reading it. And also see, anything which is real actually touches our heart. So when you write something genuine, I think it comes across as it becomes more interesting to the readers. So I think the contribution, I think everyone should write now, blending fact with fiction, because it's very interesting. Even for me to read, I love to read those kind of stories. Thank you so much.
So I have worked on several books, as you said in my introduction, 12 books. So a lot of them are fiction, but I have also written non-fiction. And I truly believe, I'll say this out right in the front, that there is nothing known as absolute non-fiction or absolute fiction, because we writers will always write a blend of stuff. Even if we write non-fiction, we are going to include our fictional bits in it. We will dramatize it. And if we are going to write fiction, then it will be inspired from maybe our true life stories or things that we have gone through. So there's nothing such as absolute fiction or absolute non-fiction. Having said that, just in order to categorize stuff, let me talk about two of my non-fiction books, which are already published, and they did quite well. And as you said that I write horror, so how would I write a non-fiction book? So what we did, when I say, I mean the book makers, Suhail and I, we came up with certain projects where we could collaborate with paranormal investigators. Paranormal investigators are those people who go to haunted locations with all their equipments, and they have a particular kind of ideology about what ghosts and spirits are, and they go to explore to find out what is the truth behind it. So the first paranormal investigator that I collaborated with was Mr. Jai Alani. Now, Jai, the horror community of India knows him very, very well. He is a very famous podcaster, and he has got several, accolades to his name. So Jai has gone to all these haunted locations like Kuldhara, Bhangar, Mayong, the Vas Villa in Bangalore, and so many places, spent nights there. And what we wanted to do was to capture his stories. So Jai would tell me in audio what he did there, and then I would sit down and write it in the prose form. So that was a kind of non-fiction. It was 95% non-fiction, but I needed to make it a coherent story. So that was how the first book, that is Haunted, this is the book, came into being. And we were delighted. Suhail, Jai, we know what kind of whooping with joy we did when Penguin greenlighted this project. Sorry. So this was the first non-fiction book that I wrote. And
we were not jumping with joy, we were jumping with Jay.
Yes, we were jumping with Jay. So a few months down the line, another book happened, another big major book deal. And this was with Hachette India. And this time I collaborated with Sarvajit Mohanty. So he's another very popular upcoming paranormal investigator, very young. That's why I say upcoming, but he has got a string of achievements to his name, including a TV show. He was host of a show known as Mana Kina Mana, Odia TV. And what we did there was we captured his paranormal case files. So we did a little bit of a difference, because with Jai, we captured the haunted locations that he had gone to, but with Sarvajit, we captured the cases that he had attended to. So there's actually a body of people who believe very strongly in ghosts. I don't know, I'm still on the fence. But there is a body of people who do that. And when something goes wrong in their house, something that is inexplicable, that they cannot explain scientifically, then they try to look for ghost hunters. So this actually happens in India. We know that. And only thing is, now we have advanced from tantrics and aghoris and babas to these paranormal investigators. And Sarvajit and his entire team at Pairs, he has an organization by that name, they go with paranormal equipment and they try to actually, like a detective, try to look at clues, paranormal clues, not normal clues, try to look at clues and get into the bottom of the matter, like what it is. and he has cracked like 200 cases. 200 cases. Most times there were very logical explanations, but there were also some times when the explanations have defied all logic. And those stories where the explanations have defied all logic, they were so fascinating. When Sarvajit told me, I was like, I had goose pimples, because I was sitting in this darkened room of mine and listening to the audio narrations, and it was like, this has to be a book. And that was how our second non-fiction book came into being, and that is The Spirits Talk to Me. With Sarvajit, I have yet another project which is not yet published, and that is with Rupa Publications, that is called as Ghost Whispers. So there again, we are talking about paranormal phenomena. So a lot of people have gone through situations like hearing electronic voice, ghost voice, or maybe sleep paralysis. You can't sleep, you feel like some weight is on you, or they have actually experienced haunting. I know that we don't like to talk about horror a lot, but you tell me one thing. Tell me one person who has not had an experience that he cannot explain. We all have had that. And this is the thing that we wanted to bring in a book. So as a horror writer, I do not want people to shun horror, say that ye nahi hota hai, because that is denial. So instead of living in denial, what I wanted to do was to present the true picture of things that have happened around us and keep it to the judgment to the reader to fathom whether it is true or not. So that is what I am doing in Ghost Whispers with Sarvajit. So this is how, this is straight up factual stories which we have taken into these books. So that is how I've done it. I'll be talking about my fiction books, which also have a real essence in it, but in subsequent questions. Thank you.
Bhavna, why don't you talk about your own book? If that also falls in the same genre, it would be wonderful.
Ma'am, your mic is on
Then,
mute.
oh, sorry. Just a minute. Is it? No, I'm not. It's not muted. Can you hear? Yeah.
It was on mute. I think Manoj unmuted it.
Oh, that's what. Oh, so sorry. It's definitely creation, because when we write a story, it's for leisure or entertainment, and history or autobiography are purely facts. And if you represent that in a book or in a movie, it becomes heavy for the readers and the viewers, and also sometimes monotonous, because you know the history. Then why do you want to see it all over again? So it's better when we blend it with a little bit of fiction. as it becomes more interesting. But the thing is, you should be sure of, I mean, that is, you should not go, there is a limit to the blending. It should not be too much where you distort the whole story. Then it's going to affect the viewers, and also the sentiments of many people who are watching that, watching a movie, or even when you're reading it. So facts, I feel, are like a frame of a story. And you can't get, if you completely distort facts and let the imagination run wild, then what happens is the frame can't hold that story. So then it collapses. So you have to be clear about how you're going to blend it with the fiction. That is what I feel.
Thank you so much, Bhavna. I think that's a very pertinent question. Uh, yeah. So I would agree with Bina ma'am over there, because I think it's very simple to you know differentiate between creation and distortion when you're doing something on the lines of historical fiction or mythological fiction. Distortion would pretty much be that as I because I'm using that example because I quoted it earlier, that the Quit India movement doesn't start in 1942 but starts in 1940. That is distortion. That is distortion of facts. But if you are blending your story with the actual facts, that is creation, right? Obviously, we all understand that the reader also needs to read something in an engaging manner. So, like Neil mentioned, that 95% of the stories are true. But if he gets too technical into the gadgets or the instruments that these paranormal investigators use, it'll become very boring and monotonous for the reader. So he has to introduce those instruments in an engaging manner. Something needs to happen in the story due to which the paranormal investigator would use that instrument. So what happens is that through the course of the story, you are understanding about the gadget. So that is how it's going to happen. Obviously, the paranormal investigator is an expert, so he's not going to be understanding about the gadget while he is at the haunted location. So it's only for the convenience of the reader that we're doing so. So I think it's definitely creation, and it goes for everyone else's book. Even if it's a true crime book, you are going to add a few more nuances so that people can visualize it, and it becomes much more interesting. Distortion largely happens, in my view, if people want to cash in on a particular subject in a very quick manner or quick time. And I always keep going back to this example about a book that I read, which was a mythological fantasy, and the first line of which was 326 BC. Lord Ram and Ravan were engaged in combat. Now 326 BC was closer to the time when Chandragupta Maurya was there in India. So not only is that a lacuna in the part of the writing, but it's also an error in judgment at the point in time of the editor and the publisher too. So what that basically shows is that you want to cash in on the genre, you want to bring it out quickly, and take the readers for granted, because what also happens is that a larger section of our population gets or rather believes what we tell them, and which is why a lot of information that is disseminated on public platforms, social platforms, might be untrue, but people tend to believe that, right? So I think that is something that the author, the publisher, needs to have a moral compass for. And as I was mentioning, that a lot of distortion actually happens on screen rather than in books. So if you see a lot of these historical shows or mythological shows, that is where you'll find a lot of issues. And I'll just give you two very quick examples. There was a show that came on Maharana Pratap, and in that they had shown that a teenage Maharana Pratap and a teenage Akbar were roaming arm in arm in a Rajasthani fair. Now when Akbar was a teenager, he was already the emperor. And you can't envisage both these great rulers roaming arm in arm as teenagers. I'm sure they had much more important things to do in life. So that's one. But in terms of a mythological show, now there was this show on Lord Krishna where they actually showed Kans being killed by Radha ji instead of Lord Krishna. Now, what happens is, and the danger really is, that a lot of people believe what they see, and especially kids. So, I mean, we've all seen B.R. Chopra's Mahabharat, and I'm sure a lot of us, believed what we saw to be true. Thankfully, it was made closer to the actual text because there were no TRP battles that one had to fight for at that point of time because there was only one channel. Um, but but what really scares me is that when someone tomorrow or 10 years later will come on a panel discussion and say that Kans was actually killed by Radhaji, and if that person is not seeing it in the supervision of an adult, how do you correct them? So that is the main problem. That is a major concern, and I think somewhere someone needs to draw the line between ratings and what you are giving to the nation as a whole. I do not think that the ratings would have suffered if Lord Krishna would have, killed Kans, because that is what everyone knows, and it would have made for a beautiful, spectacle sight. But changing the narrative becomes an issue unless it is backed. Now, I don't have a problem with the change narrative, but you can say that your source is based on XYZ, right? We all know that there are different versions of the Ramayana. So, depending on which Ramayana you're relying on, you can make those changes. But, quite clearly, if that's not the case, then the danger is not what we are showing at this point in time. The danger is what people tend to believe now till the end of their lives.
Thank you for the question, Bhavna. Um, for me, creation and distortion both are very broad terms. And being a painter and an artist of, a musician too, I believe a distorted note is not necessarily a discordant note. Distortion is something which has to be understood from an artistic perspective. And by that, I mean that you cannot say that distortion is independent of creation completely. Now, you can obviously transcend the genre and move away from, say, true crime and write something else if you distort a narrative. I completely agree with Suhail Bhai that if there is a fact which is laid out in history, for instance, when the Babri Masjid was raised, you can't change that. That is when it happened. So that should be a part of your larger narrative. But of course, you can opine on everything, and opinions shape the way society moves. So while I may consider Mahatma Gandhi a patriot, somebody else may think Godse is a patriot. Now that is where an opinion comes in. So that is where it still remains in the realms of creation. That is why I say it's absolute freedom of speech, which does need to apply, but not freedom of speech which distorts absolute well documented facts. For instance, in 326 BC, it's hard for Ram and others to have conversations, and obviously Akbar was the emperor of India, so for him to roam in a fair with Maharana Pratap would also be kind of weird. So both these things, are clear distortions. When I say you have an artistic license, I mean you have to do it artistically, do the work artistically, much like abstract paintings, which are popular across the world. Yes, you are presenting a distorted image of life. You are perhaps even presenting the uglier side of life, but you are doing it in a way which remains, a way of conveying a message and does not take away from the piousness of society. As far as writing true crime goes and, keeping the blend right and coordinating with my father goes, see, my father has perhaps read more FIRs in his life than most people do. He has been in the police for 37 years. So when it comes to writing facts only, he has a very clear-cut picture of how they have to be worded, how they have to be written, because everything in his mind ticks like a clock. So he knows that, this is when the crime happened, this was the time, this is how it was recorded, these are the sections which must have, come into play, how the police must have acted, how the legal procedure happened. My job here would be to romanticize it without distorting it, because nobody wants to read an FIR. I think Suhail Bhai made a very important point when he said that you also have to keep the audience in mind. So you cannot dish out a book which reads like a police report. You have to bring in your opinions. You have to bring in, the feelings of society at large. And I feel that an effective way of doing that is to actually bring, several lenses of telling the story into the picture. Particularly in true crime, there is the perspective of a cop, there is a perspective of a criminal, there is a perspective of victims. So when you try and blend all these together in a book, you end up achieving a heady mix, which I feel connects more with readers. At the same time, these characters can actually give you different versions of the same story without distorting the actual event. So that is where the writing skill comes in. And so if some XYZ says in a direct dialogue that, okay, fine, I think Ram existed in the time of Jesus. So, okay, fine, that is okay. But if somebody is saying it as a matter of fact in another chapter, where you're writing a chapter about some detailed historical event, that is where it becomes distortion. So yes, it is something to keep in mind, and you should always make sure that you write literature responsibly, because there are a lot of people who are going to read it and they're definitely going to quote you in future. So you have to take on a responsibility towards your readers when you write anything. So whether true crime or mythological fiction, I think everything has the power to shape opinions. So we definitely need to draw a fine line between creation and distortion. I don't necessarily want to delink the two, but distort as long as you're creative.
So first, I'll start, talking about generally how this applies. I think that you have to keep in mind the purpose for which you are writing the book. That is the first place where you start with, because I believe some books are written to educate, some books are written to entertain, and some books are written to both educate as well as entertain. Now, if you are writing a book to educate, to provide information, then you cannot veer from the fact. You have to be as true to fact as possible. And of course, we are human beings. So we cannot write in a way where we will not be putting our judgment and opinions across. That will inevitably happen. But we have to write it as neutrally as possible if it is a book which we are writing to educate. If we are writing to entertain, then we can go all out. But the problem is when you are writing to both educate as well as entertain, which is what we did with my books, Haunted as well as The Spirits Talk to Me. We were trying to also show the people what these paranormal investigators do, but at the same time, we also wanted to give them a cracker of a story which they would continue reading. So when we do that, Suhail has already said most of how we went about it. If there is a fact, a very unshakable historical fact or a technical fact, then you cannot, take it out from the picture. You have to mention it as it is. But if it is something like a sequence of an event from A to B, how it happened, then you can take a liberty there. Then you can dramatize it. You can make it a little bit, interesting for your audience. And that is how most of us writers write. As I mentioned in my previous question, nothing is absolute non-fiction and nothing is absolute fiction. So that is it. So when I was writing Jai's books, I knew that Jai has this legion of fans. Even Sarbajit has a legion of fans. So when I'm writing their stories are already out there in their podcasts and YouTube shows and stuff like that. So their fans or their followers already know what they have done. So we could not go very differently from that. We had to give them the same thing, but in a literary format. So that was where I was very much curtailed. Like I could not do a lot of stuff that was different. But now I'm working with on certain other books, which I'll not talk about, but I'll give an example to explain what I'm meaning to say, like the movie Conjuring. Now, we know that the movie Conjuring was based on the case files of Ed and Lorraine Warren. They are famous paranormal investigators, no longer with us. So it was an actual case that they cracked. But in order to show it as a movie, we could not show it technically as it was. So there was a lot of dramatization done. And if you watch The Conjuring, it was also mentioned in the movie that it is based on true incidents. So that is where, the disclaimers come into the picture. And the disclaimers tell you whether how much of it, how much of a book or how much of a movie you have to take as fact. If it is something like based on, then you know that something has been dramatized. Otherwise, it would be just mentioned as a true story. But I will be, I know that this panel is going on and we all have, we are on some side of the fence here. But I would strongly try to say that, there is nothing that can be totally fiction or nothing that can be totally non-fiction. We cannot write something, even a newspaper article, which is, so heavily edited for words, for language, will always tell you what the reporter is thinking. If you analyze it, if you read it with a kind of analytical mind, you will know. And it is very common with our news channels. But that is a different story altogether. So this is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
I lost your voice. Whatever publisher is not, I heard till there, and yeah, I heard that. I heard that. Just tell me from the point where the publisher is not. So sure. I think it's a very straightforward question, to be really honest. See, either the publisher will get convinced or they will not get convinced. As simple as that. If a publisher is not showing an initial interest in the book, now there are two kinds of responses that can be generated. One is that the publisher is reluctant, and the other is that the publisher is not keen. There's a slight difference between the two. If the publisher is reluctant and having second thoughts, and the publisher chooses to explain or discuss with me what those issues are, I can give a response. I can first understand. So the point is that I also need to understand their concern. If it's a valid concern, we'll try to work around it. if it's a response that I have which can ease the publisher's query, I'll respond in that manner. However, if a publisher is saying no to a project or declining a particular project, I do not see the reason why I should try and convince them. Now, I'll tell you why I say so. Because if a publisher is saying no to a project, which means that the publisher does not believe in the book, right? So, after constant badgering, pestering, trying to convince them, even if they take up the book tomorrow, you know for sure that because they do not believe in it or they initially did not believe in it, the kind of work that they will do on the book will not be 100%. They may not want to promote it, all out, offline, online, anyway. They may not want to speak about it to that great an extent. They may not want to push their authors at literary festivals or that particular author at a literary festival, knowing that if something goes awry, the publisher will, everyone will hold the publisher's neck, so on and so forth. So the idea is to work with like-minded people. Only if you work with people who truly believe in your vision will you get the best possible response. So yeah, I mean, it's a very short and honest response that I'm giving to you, that if you believe in the project, do it. If somebody else does not believe in your vision, why would you want to compromise on your vision? Go ahead with someone who truly believes in it, so that you can actually present to the readers what you had initially started out doing.
Yeah. See, I always like helping people, and I was looking out for a school at that time for my grandson because he's dyslexic, and I realized there are hardly any schools around. And then I found one Lower Parel, and where he took his admission there, and there I met so many parents who told me that they have to come from very far off places, like around 20 kilometers away every day to bring the children to school because there are hardly any schools around. And then I felt that I should do something about it. I need to find and at least get a school somewhere near. You can't get it in every locality, but at least somewhere in central Mumbai I wanted, because most of them were coming from Ghatkopar, Thane, then from Chembur. And Tarun school was actually in Lower Peril at that time. So I contacted the media. I even wrote to the mayor. I wrote to all the newspapers. And suddenly one day I get a call from CNN IBN asking whether I can be the citizen journalist show for them. And they'd like to do a show on this. This was in August 2008. So I was really happy that, but the problem with me is I can't act. I'm really bad at that. So I said, it'll be difficult for me to do the show. They said, no, you can take a month to do it, but you have to do it. So I agreed on that because it is a really important cause. And I also noticed another thing is, I used to drive my grandson every day to school, which was 17 kilometers away. Up and down, it'd be 35 kilometers. So it was actually, my back was hurting. But when I saw the other parents, they were bringing them in, the children in train and buses, and some of them were also on wheelchairs. So that when I saw, I thought, I'm hardly, even for me, that's not, it's hardly a problem to, because I'm driving the child at least. Then what happened is, when I did the citizen journalist show, I don't know how, but there were a lot of viewers, and many people from abroad also wrote letters, and it really did very well. That the CNN IBN told me that there will be a school one day which will come somewhere in central Mumbai. So I was really anticipating that. But about 6 months later, I got a call saying that we are going to have a school near your home, in your locality. So I was very happy about that. And 3 years later, I saw the school. It was just a stone's throw away from my house. So I do say it's a real miracle, because it's not easy to get a place, such a big place to have a school. So I've actually written this in my book. under the mango tree, just to inspire the people that your dreams do come true if you work hard at it and go after it and not give up. So that is, my take on this.
Superb, superb, ma'am. That's very inspirational. And in fact, you were mentioning about certain people coming from Thane, all the way from Thane. The interesting thing is that in a lot of books written by Maanas and his father, a lot of characters again come from the Thane because the book is a police one.
Oh, again, I have to mute. I think Manoj is doing it because he knows me, that I'll forget to.
So he was actually testing your lip sync abilities.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Okay, now this is a challenge because you're telling a story writer, a person who makes stories for a living, to tell something completely factual. So, okay, there were a couple of these kind of weird things that have happened with me. I mean, I don't know whether it is ghostly or paranormal or what, but one of them that I remember is when I was a child, around I think 7 or 8, yeah, maybe a little older. So we used to, our apartment was on the 3rd floor. This is Mumbai now. And it was a very old building, even at that time, around 30, 35 years old. And this was on a compound, a large compound, a largish, very large compound, 7 big buildings on it. And there were these rumors that the entire building is built on a very old, burial ground. So that was the kind of building that I grew up in. So here, on one particular night, I was sleeping, and the balcony was open, and next to it there was this other building, the same compound but another building, and I could see the terrace. It was a full moon night and stuff like that. Okay, that part may be stories. So it was the terrace I could see, and in the middle of the night, I got up. I don't know why I got up. I was anyway. I'm not a very sound sleeper, so my eyes opened and I could see the terrace. And now I do not know whether it is truth or illusion or what, but on that terrace I could see a woman, and she was typically dressed in the kind of, the bhutni chudel dresses, the white flowing sari. I'm sure that was a dream, but I actually saw, and I did all the stuff to ensure that I was awake. I pinched myself and I got up and sat, and that woman was still there. I was not so scared because we used to share a room, and my brother was also there, so I was not that scared. I was not lonely, at least, so I could see that woman, and she was there for a while. And I do not know what I did. I just tucked myself in my sheet and I just slept because nothing else. In the morning, I thought that it was definitely a dream. That kind of thing cannot be real. It was definitely a dream. Then when we went down to play sometime later in the morning, we found out that the watchman had not come, had not reported on duty. And he had not come. And there was no reason why. So we were children. But the elders, they went out to see what happened to the watchman and all. And by afternoon, they came back with this very bizarre news that the watchman says that he will not step in that building again. And the reason being, in the morning at 3 a.m., the watchman was just patrolling as usually he does. And there was this woman who came up to him And he asked that, who are you and why are you in this building at this time, etc., etc. He didn't get scared. He first thought that she must be a thief or something, because this building was very secluded and stuff like that. So there was very little protection. I'm talking about the 80s. So he did that, and that woman, she just turned to face him. She raised her hand and gave him a solid slap all across his cheek, like 5 finger marks. So the watchman, he collapsed. That slap was so powerful. He says that it could not be a normal chata, it was something else. He collapsed. When he woke up, when he opened his eyes, it was almost dawn. He just fled. And then he said that I'm not coming to this building again, because I'm very sure what I saw was not a human thing, and I'm not coming anymore. So that woman who I had seen, that time I connected. It was not a dream. It could not have been a dream. I actually saw something that night.
I can hear you. Bhavna, it's interesting that when your father is serving as a cop in the Badlands of UP, the kind of stuff you hear at home is thrilling enough. And often a lot of crime thrillers look very vanilla when you hear of real stories which are happening around you. So as a 10-year-old or as a 12-year-old, you hear things which most people never want to experience in their lives. So I was actually particularly attracted by the negative character. So yes, Don was a character I really enjoyed, and I wanted to don that hat myself sometimes. But then I was living in a police wala's house, so it would have been rather difficult for me to take inspiration from the other side. Uh, Having said that, now that I am writing with him, I get a chance to don that hat and write about the Don himself. So there are things which life comes full circle, as they say. But Bhavna, I must say that I drew a lot of inspiration from the stories of victims. One thing I noticed was that people are so helpless when they approach the police. Sometimes, people have nowhere to go. People do not even understand what is the jurisdiction of the police, and sometimes, in something maybe as complicated as a divorce, they don't know where to go, so they'll come to a police officer, and they will often not get the right treatment because the police should be inherently sensitive. So when I used to see people suffer at the hands of the legal system at large and the criminal justice system in general, this is what truly drove me to think about these stories in more detail and get inspired. So I will say that it was more real life which inspired me, because there was so much happening. I'll tell you an example. I went to a school in Gorakhpur, a very famous place now, and so this school, the real time crime which you see in schools of UP is that the first day my dad came to pick me up, he saw that there were students actually flinging chairs at each other physically, and there were these students around me, almost wanting to beat me up because I was not participating in this violence. So it's a different world, So for me, the understanding of crime was, the threshold is very high. I mean, just a murder or two is no crime. So you need to have at least a decent bloodbath to actually call it a crime. And besides, I must tell you, there was one thing I was reasonably good at, which was listening. So I remember a lot of things which I heard from people, and that is one of the reasons why there are so many concepts we are being able to find from my dad's career, because he often thinks that, oh no, this is not good enough. For instance, this book, the Barabanki Narcos, would actually never have happened had he not been telling me that he did this haul. He was like, 450 kg पकड़ा था एक बार, दूसरी बार भी 450, आई थिंक कुछ 1.5-2 क्विंटल था. I was like, what was the amount? Because the amounts we hear in the news are so small. 20 kg, 25 kgs makes national news. I was like, how much? He said 1300 kgs was recovered. And I said, so is this a record? Yeah, I believe it's a world record. And I said, so why is this not a book? And so this is how, the brainstorming always helps. And he never believes in his own concepts. So for him, the threshold of crime is even higher. Perhaps we'll have to look for an international conspiracy the next time we are writing a true crime book. But as far as getting inspired is concerned, it is the victims of crime who have inspired my writing and my personality in general.
Okay, so the time begins now. This is like my Oscar winning speech. Uh, so, the first thing that I would say is that do not keep horror aside. It is something that you need to experience and know. There is a lot of talk about horror is something different and it's not a literary genre as they say, but no, it's not like that. People who have read horror and even my own readers, especially for my book Yakshini, they come back to me and they say that it's a good book. So do give horror a chance, and thank you very much to the Asian Literary Society for pulling off this major event. Thank you.
Me? I can't hear you clearly. Yeah. I wish more people would read my book Under the Mango Tree because it actually it's an inspiring story, and I've written the story. Actually, the main protagonist Dia, she is in an abusive marriage, and how she becomes a winner and wins all her battles all alone, without any help, and with one mantra, I can, because she's very strong and she doesn't give up. So I feel that there are many people I find give up on life very easily. So for them, I wrote this book so that once I feel they should gain their strength and go on in life, work hard, and surely someday there will be something waiting for you. So that is my message to all the people around, or all the readers.
All I would say is that I am in complete agreement with Neil and Bina ma'am that reading is the key to writing actually. And so please read. Read across genres, read horror, read non-fiction, read fiction, and read all kinds of books. I mean, you get inspired when you read a Yakshini, you get inspired when you read a Hunt for Rama's book, you get inspired when you read Under the Mango Tree, and you may also draw some inspiration when you read my upcoming book. So please keep reading, because writers thrive on their readers, and we are always grateful if we are able to contribute something to society. So thank you, and I hope this was 1 minute.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having that confidence. But I'd honestly like to say that there's nothing much more to add, because if we are unable to, convey what we wanted to in the past 70 minutes, I don't think 1 minute will suffice to do the same. And I secondly feel that it's generally been a very invigorating session where everyone has brought out some very pertinent points. And I think for anyone who's been hearing it, they'll get not one but five different points of views, across genres and how to tackle them. So I think that's the real success of the session, because as I had mentioned, as people from the literary fraternity, what makes a difference is what we give out to the society. And over here, I think this session has given out various viewpoints and counterpoints, to people not only as readers but also as authors. So it's been a very very invigorating session, as I was mentioning, and it's always wonderful to be in such glorious company of authors, storytellers, and speakers, who double up as thinkers in such festivals. And a lot of credit, I feel, should also go to the moderator, because I think speakers are only able to do justice in giving the right answers when they ask the correct questions. So I'd like to thank all of you and ALS, of course, for organizing this and giving not only us but a lot of people from the literary fraternity, a mirror as well as an opportunity to expand their horizons. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bhavna. Actually, you moderated the show very well.
Thank you, Bhavna. Thank you so much.
Thank you to Suhail, my literary agent. Because of him, also I've sold around 1,500 and even more, I feel, the copies of my book.
All our litigation.
And to my publisher, he'll get, my God, he'll be upset, Deepak Yadav.
Yeah.
There are a lot of ghosts talking. There is a lot of echo coming.
Yes,
Thank you, everyone, and especially Suhail, because you have always been doing such a lot of things for me personally and for the literary community in general. Thank you so much, and keep up the good work, everyone involved. Thanks.